Happy Saturday. Wanted to hop on tonight to talk a little bit about relationships and this idea of recurring fights. So that means couples who have fights about the same thing over and over. So the bottom line is that when you have recurring fights about the same thing, there are underlying issues at work. So you have to really get into what the underlying issues are in order to resolve those and then not have fights about the same thing over and over again. So I have a few examples that I'm going to run through with you guys. First, let's talk about the things that couples fight about the most. So some of the most common things couples fight about are money, sex, and kids. So I've got an example from each of those and how to work on resolving the underlying issue or what may be at work in that situation. So with money, that's the most common thing couples fight about. So with money, maybe you're upset with your spouse for spending too much. Maybe, every time they go to Target or every time they go to the hobby store, whatever, they spend too much money. And when they come home, you're upset about that. Now, that is fine in and of itself. I mean, if there's a budgetary issue, then you need to respect that. But a lot of times that is the issue. There's an underlying issue like we don't have the budget for this. I've been asking you to sit down and make a budget with me and you refuse to do that. So then you're spending and that puts us behind on bills, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there are trust issues around money that need to be resolved. I always prefer for couples to have a joint bank account, but in certain situations, I talk about this in my marriage book, in certain situations, it's better for there to be separate accounts if someone can't be trusted with the resources. Or maybe that fight is happening because there's anxiety about upcoming expenses. So maybe there's a big expense coming up, like in Arizona, that would be like auto renewal, your registration renewal. Maybe there are some hospital bills that we're waiting to see what the insurance is going to pay. And so whatever it is, there's this anxiety about these upcoming expenses. And so maybe the fight is really about that versus what exactly you bought at Target or the hobby shop or whatever it is. The second issue is sex. So a lot of times in couples, there's a disagreement about sexual relationships and the frequency of the sexual encounters in the relationship. So there are 8 types of intimacy. I detail this in my book. You can shop that here. It's Fix Your Freaking Marriage, practical tips to just start somewhere. So I go through the 8 types of intimacy. And basically, before someone is going to feel comfortable, particularly women, but not always, before someone is going to feel truly comfortable about doing the horizontal hula, you have to make sure that both of you are on the same page. You're connected in these other forms or other areas or ways of being intimate. So that can be emotional, it can be financial, it can be experiential, it can be physical that's not sexual. There's a ton of different ways to have intimacy in a relationship. So if you're upset because you continue to get rejected by your partner, it's probably a good idea to really sit down and talk about that. And really dissect what's going on. Why is it that I am having such a hard time with getting you to have a sexual encounter with me? What is that about? And so it could be that there are trust issues. It could be that there's a disconnect in some of these other areas. It could be that I tell people, foreplay starts at 6 a.m. And so if you're not, as soon as you wake up, if you're not working on connecting with your partner or being kind or at least not being abusive or rude or snarky, then you can't expect that they're going to be just ready to tango, that afternoon or evening or whatever. So the idea there is to stay connected in these other ways. And like I said, 8 types of intimacy detailed in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage. You can shop that right here. The other one is kids. So that's the third area. We said money, sex, and kids are the things couples fight about the most. So when it comes to kids, it could be that people are disagreeing and having recurring fights because they have different ideas about what's acceptable, what's allowed in terms of the behavior for the kids. What kind of things do they get to have? What's their curfew? What are the things that they're allowed to do and whom are they allowed to do them with? The other one is discipline. So maybe there's disagreement on discipline, and that can be an underlying issue that causes a lot of fights when it comes to the kids. Or there could be disconnect in any one of these areas that just causes a person to feel a certain type of way, and then they're more inclined to have a fight about any number of things. So when it comes to kids, it could be around discipline. And my favorite parenting resource, you guys know I've been a psychologist for over 20 years. I've seen all the things. And I used to work with kids. I don't work with kids anymore. But my favorite parenting resource is Parenting with Love and Logic by Klein and Fay. You can find that on Amazon. The link is under the resources tab on my website. So again, Parenting with Love and Logic. The emphasis there is on natural consequences, having the punishment fit the crime, that kind of thing. So it could be that there's this disconnect in discipline or what the kids are allowed to do or not or whatever. And so then that may be why we're constantly fighting every time some situation with the kids comes up. So those are 3 examples. As I said, most common thing that couples fight about is money, and 2 others are sex and children. So those are the top 3, and these are some ideas for underlying issues. All of this is detailed in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage. You can shop that here or it's on Amazon, and it talks about all different things. So we talk about forgiveness, which is the first meaty chapter, because by the time couples make it to me, they're having some issues in the relationship. Then we talk about the 16 elements of a healthy marriage. That includes the 8 types of intimacy. There's chapters on fair fighting, conflict resolution, dealing with challenging partners, you name it, it's all in there. 76,000 words, 287 pages. You can find it there. Someone just asked a question about what do you say about fear of divorce? So maybe you can say a little bit more about that. I didn't catch the username, but a little bit more about what you mean. When it comes to divorce, I call it the D word, and I tell couples, do not throw that word around in your relationship unless one of you is planning to file for divorce within the next 48 hours or retain an attorney. So divorce, the word divorce has no place in a marriage. It's wielded around a lot of times as a threat. It induces fear. If you're afraid of divorce, if that's the question that's being asked, then it could have something to do with what you're afraid about, your ability to not make it without your partner. So maybe there's a fear that you can't survive financially. Maybe there's a fear that you can't survive emotionally. It could be any number of things. So maybe say some more about that. But it should not be a word that's wielded around. Divorce it has no place in marriage unless, as I said, one of you is going to either hire an attorney or file for divorce within the next 24 to 48 hours. Other questions about marriage. We're talking marriage today. And I have my book that you can shop in the link here, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, Practical Tips to Just Start Somewhere. Thank you. It's covering a multitude of sins today, my hat. But I didn't want to have to get all ready and do all the things and get all dolled up. So I threw on a hat. Thank you. All right. This is me on a Saturday. This is what you get. All right. Any other questions that you guys have? So I was talking about my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage. Thank you, Ellery. So many chapters, as I said, 287 pages and 30 something chapters. There are homework assignments with each of the elements chapters that invite you to assess yourself and assess other people or assess your spouse rather, in terms of how you're doing on that topic. So again, Fix Your Freaking Marriage on Amazon or shop it here. I think it's like $16 on Amazon. I think TikTok's doing it for less. So any other questions about relationship or marriage? Hopefully I answered that question about divorce. Again, D word is not something that should be wielded around as a threat. That's one of the rules for fair fighting, is just keeping that word out of your discussions unless somebody's going to act on it in the next day or two. Other questions, other things that you notice are a recurring topic in your relationship. Is it wrong to stay for financial stability? Wrong is not the right word. And the answer is it depends, right? So if you don't feel like there are any resources, there's not a friend you could stay with, there's not a family member who could help you out, there's not a GoFundMe that you can run or whatever, and you can't get out, then, yeah, some people do stay for financial stability. They sock money away, and then, or get a job, or get education to get a job, or get a better paying job, and then they will leave. So I understand. I certainly don't judge people who stay for financial stability or financial reasons, but you have to look at the cost of it. So if there's, active physical abuse going on or something like that, I mean, I would take a look at all possible resources, run a campaign to raise money, ask friends, ask family members, see what you can do. Certainly there are shelters if it's domestic violence. I wouldn't say it's wrong though, Michelle. I couldn't put that word on it. I don't think it's wrong or right. It just depends. And sometimes it's just a necessary situation until you can get your bearing financially, and then you can make plans to leave. Divorce is expensive, even if you don't have to hire an attorney. Just filing is several $100s. And then you never know how it's going to go. It could be really ugly. But again, you have to think about the cost of it. So the emotional cost of it, rather. Because if there's abuse going on, you definitely need to protect yourself and set boundaries. And like I said, tap into your resources, friends, family members, that kind of thing. Other things that you guys notice you and your partner are frequently fighting about. So we're talking about fighting about the same crap, fighting about the same issues over and over. And what is it that those issues are? We talked about money, sex, and kids as 3 of the most common, and some ways to work around that by exploring what the underlying issues are. If you and your partner aren't able to come to an agreement about the underlying issues and then resolve those, then it may be time to call in a coach. So you call in a therapist or a pastoral counselor if you're a believer. There are different ways that you can get help. The book that I wrote details the step-by-step process that I use to help couples navigate whatever the issues are. So again, we look at forgiveness, because by the time couples reach me, there's some water under the bridge. Then we go into the 16 elements of a healthy marriage. Then we look at there are some different guidelines about fair fighting, resolving conflict, and then dealing with difficult personalities or dealing with difficult or challenging partners in the relationship. So there's some stuff about people who are what I call nuclear reactors. There's some stuff in there about narcissism. So dealing with difficult or challenging situations where the personality of your partner is a challenge, or if your own personality, if you feel like that presents a challenge in the relationship, then the book also talks about that. So when I look at the challenging personalities, you can, I approach it from both sides. So lots of material in there. That was a tremendous labor of love. Any argument, issue I want to discuss, I get divorce threat. I can't emotionally deal with divorce. So I think you can, put a moratorium on the D word, divorce, in your relationship. It's not fair to throw that around. And I think that might involve, if your partner's not willing to do that, that might involve getting some help, seeing a therapist. If your partner's not willing to go to therapy with you, then you can go yourself and learn how to set boundaries. So any issue that you want to discuss, your partner meets you with divorce is the question that I have. Totally not fair. And maybe that relationship is not going to be a healthy one for you. Maybe that's not a relationship that's going to end up lasting. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know all the details. I certainly don't know their side. But you have the right to set boundaries, and you also have the right not to be threatened with the word divorce at every turn. What I would maybe suggest, and again, I don't know the details, so pardon me, but is, you can look at how you can present issues. So I talk about this in my marriage book about how to present the issues, because presentation is everything. Presentation is key. So how are you going to your partner when you want to talk about issues? And again, maybe you're doing things just fine, But for the sake of discussion and looking at some, ideas here, I want to just talk about being careful about how you present it. So one of my favorite things to do is do everything you can to avoid the word why. Now, this is for anybody, talking with your kids, talking with your partner, whatever. The word why is a very defense-provoking word used in isolation. So my favorite phrase comes from Columbo. Some of you may remember Columbo, the detective, frumpy detective from the 70s. It was a series. He always got his guy. And his approach was not to go directly in and ask the question. He always knew the answers anyway, but it was just a matter of getting the person to own up to what they did. So one of the favorite things that I like to say to people is, help me understand. So we're trying to have a meeting of the minds here so that we can resolve this issue that we're constantly fighting about. So help me understand what it is about me spending money that concerns you. Or help me understand what's going on for you that you are rejecting sexual activity when I ask you for that in our relationship. You can use why as long as it's not used in isolation. Again, I still try to avoid it, but sometimes the only way to say it is help me understand why, blah, blah, blah. So help me understand, that's a key phrase in talking to any person, whether it's a kid, a coworker, family member, spouse, the cashier at the grocery store, Target, whatever it is. Why is a very defense-provoking word. So we want to try and stay away from that. Malika, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for chiming in with your question. Any other questions about why we're fighting about the same crap day in and day out? For those of you who are just joining, we're talking about recurring fights. Why are my partner and I fighting about the same stuff over and over? The short answer is because there are underlying issues that simply need to be addressed. And unless you get to those underlying issues and reach some sort of resolution or agree to disagree or whatever, then you're going to keep fighting about the same crap. Not always can you agree, and that's when it's time to get some help, whether that's reading my marriage book or another marriage book, or if that's going to a therapist, or as I said, a pastoral counselor if you're a believer. There are marriage groups in a lot of churches. There are marriage forums online, different things that you can take advantage of and avail yourself of. So lots of different resources. Hi, your mother. Thank you so much for your sweet comment on my post earlier. That was so kind of you. Thanks for saying hi. Any questions about the same fights? What are we fighting about over and over and over again? Remember, we're looking to address the underlying issues. And like I said, if you can't reach any sort of a resolution, then maybe it's a function of we need some help. Okay, there was a comment I just saw. My husband doesn't care about anything except the TV. House can be falling apart. That is really tough, Michelle. Oh, sorry, I'm shaking my phone. You have to figure out what's going to motivate a person. So I don't think I've ever talked to you guys about laziness before. I think it's on my to-do list, but I don't believe in lazy. I don't think laziness exists. It's not a thing. It's not a useful word. It's not helpful. What you're seeing is someone who's unmotivated. So a person's behavior may look lazy, but they're actually just unmotivated. They're not motivated to do the thing, whether it's something around the house, yard work on the marriage. I'm not saying it's fair. And Michelle, I'm certainly not saying he should just sit in front of the television and veg out. That's not fair to you. It's actually not fair to him either, because he's just kind of rotting away sitting in front of the television. So it requires a heart-to-heart talk about what is it that it's going to take in order for us to not be sitting in front of the TV all the time. So you can start with things that are relatively benign, maybe not an emotional component to them really. So you can hey, let's play a game together. Or if it has to be in front of the TV, at least maybe find a movie or a series or something that you both want to watch together, and then have a discussion about it. So then after the movie or the show or the whatever documentary, turn that off, have a discussion about it. Now we're at least talking and the television is not on. Hopefully there's something you can do that way. So again, if you can get beyond the television, then maybe playing a game, maybe going for a walk, going for a drive, going out to grab a bite to eat, where there's no television there, so don't go to a sports bar, but there's no television there, so it's just the two of you sitting and talking and discussing, trying to create, Michelle, these little opportunities for there to be some talk, some exchange, interchange. If your husband is just not willing, ever, never, ever, never, well, you don't deserve that. You deserve a healthier relationship. But I would love to see you guys get some help and maybe try out some of these things. Sell products instead of... Oh, live video violation. Okay, I guess I can't say other places to buy my book. Let me confirm. Okay, I'm in therapy. He's not. Good. I think that's great. And certainly you could talk with your therapist about some of these ideas that I mentioned and, setting your own boundaries. And, just because he's stuck sitting at home in front of the television, it also doesn't mean that you have to be. So if there's a friend or a family member, or if you have children, take them out, go do something. Again, it doesn't have to cost anything. It can just be going for a walk. It can be, window shopping, whatever it is, meeting a friend at the park. Any number of things that you can do. You can stay active, you can stay busy, you get to have those boundaries. Just because he wants to stay at home doesn't mean that you have to stay at home. So I'm glad to hear that you're getting some help with that, Michelle, and I think you can talk more with your therapist about some of these ideas. And again, you can find lots of ideas about experiential intimacy, one of the 8 types of intimacy, in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, which you can shop here. 287 pages about relationships. And it doesn't just have to be a marriage. It can be any relationship. I also like to use it as sort of a premarital primer. So if someone wants to do premarital therapy, we're going to go through those 16 elements. And we're going to talk about, where are you on this? Are you all in agreement on all of these different elements? And then when we get to intimacy, these 8 types of intimacy, are you all in agreement on that? What does that look like? Before you get married, before you tie the knot, say forever, say I do, whatever, you can look at those elements. So it doesn't just, it's called Fix Your Freaking Marriage because I had to pick a lane. So, but it's good for any relationship. Other things that you guys are fighting about. Other things that they seem to be recurring issues, things that keep coming up in your relationship. Another issue that I see is trust. And so you have to protect your relationship. Marriage and relationships are under attack in America. Our divorce rate in America is over 50%. And then when you have second and third and fourth marriages, it just goes up. The divorce rate just increases. So you have to do everything you can to protect that marriage. And that includes trust. Trust comes even before love. Because how can I trust you and give my heart to you? How can I love you and give my heart to you if I don't trust you? So trust is the cornerstone of marriage, is what I say. The cornerstone of a good, healthy relationship. So if there are trust issues, whether someone has violated the trust in the past, or if someone came into the marriage with trust issues and those are rearing their ugly head, or both, whatever, you can address those trust issues in a number of ways. Also, I discuss this in the book. There's a chapter on infidelity. There's stuff on just restoring trust or establishing trust for the first time if you haven't. And it involves basically being accountable. So there are simple things you can do, like if you're going to be gone on a business trip or, a girl's trip or a guy's trip or whatever, you can FaceTime. So again, I'm not naive enough to think that just because you FaceTime your spouse doesn't mean you don't hang up the FaceTime and go and do something foolish or unfaithful or whatever. But these are just ways that you can work at building that trust. So all detailed in the marriage, Fix Your Freaking Marriage. You can shop it here, and lots more information about that. So there are ways that you can build that trust. And again, it's about being accountable. So I tell couples, there's no reason you shouldn't share your location. If for no other reason than safety. If your partner doesn't want to share their location with you, why? What's the big deal? We said I do and forever in front of God and everybody, so why can't we share locations? What is it about what you're doing that you don't want me to know? Why can't I know where you are? Like I said, if for no other reason than safety. So I think it's important to share locations. I think that, trust is I can leave my phone on the cabinet and I'm not worried about my husband having my password, and vice versa. If I pick up his phone and I need to go find the landscaper's number, I can do that. And I don't have to, he's not worried about me seeing something he's not supposed to be doing. So when there's that defensiveness and that sort of hiding and protecting the phone, to me, that's an issue. And I say, early in a relationship, maybe it's a little bit different, but marriage, I've been married for over 20 years. There's no privacy in marriage except when you're in the bathroom. Okay. So there's no reason to have all of these secrets. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't go and talk to your girlfriend or your guy friend, if you're a guy, whatever, same sex friends about your marriage or about challenges. But one of the ways that infidelity starts is when partners in the marriage talk to other sex partners about their marriage. So as a female, if I go to work and I'm talking to a male coworker, that is a slippery slope. Maybe they have great advice. Maybe they are a counselor on the side or work through their church as a counselor. It doesn't matter. Then go see them in that professional setting. When you start to exchange personal information with someone of the other sex, like in the workplace, that's a slippery slope. And I talk about that in the book as well, Fix Your Freaking Marriage. So lots of stuff can turn into infidelity pretty quickly. Most people who commit infidelity or cheat, they don't set out to do that. There are some who do. They set out to do that, and that is their goal, and they are trying to, screw their partner over or whatever. I've seen that, unfortunately. But most people who cheat, they don't set out to do that. So it evolves or devolves, if you will, out of a relationship. A lot of times it's a coworker relationship. Having a relationship with someone virtually, still a relationship, still qualifies as infidelity. Pornography, unless it's something that you're engaging in together and something you enjoy as a couple, and that's the only time that you're engaging in it, I'm not going to judge you for that. But if you're looking at it behind closed doors and your spouse is unaware, there are a lot of people who would consider that cheating because you're bringing someone else into the marriage. Then there's the whole phenomenon of porn creep, which I've talked about in a previous video. And that is where people with basically an addiction to porn or frequent use of porn find that they're not able to get aroused in a sexual encounter unless porn is involved. It's called porn creep. The idea that it creeps into your marriage. So it's the phenomenon, not the person. I suppose there are some porn creeps out there, but pornography is viewed as infidelity by a lot of people. Slippery slope when you're discussing your personal information about your relationship with someone of the other sex who isn't your partner. And if you have trouble talking to your partner about that, like I said, you may want to involve a coach. So someone on the outside, a pastor, a therapist, counselor, psychologist, whatever, someone who can help you kind of navigate through those issues. So for those of you who are just joining, we started out talking about the most common things that couples fight about, and how these fights are going to be recurring, keep happening unless and until you resolve the underlying issues. So we talked about money, sex, and kids. Just talked about trust. That's going to be huge. Any other things, any other questions about things you guys commonly fight about, or like recurring fights? Or any particular questions about like conflict resolution or fair fighting. Again, all of that is detailed in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, that you can shop here on TikTok if you want more information. But any other questions about marriage and fighting and the things that you're repeatedly fighting about? See if anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, I will hop off and head to dinner. Thank you guys for chiming in. I appreciate you and the little hearts and gifts and sweet things that you guys are doing. How do we repair after an argument? Great question. So my forgiveness chapter would probably help with that. So it depends on the argument, depends on, a lot of other factors, and, without knowing all of the particulars, you can repair after an argument by coming back. Everybody calm down and come back and talk about the relationship in calmer, when everybody's calm and has had time to defuse, maybe, get some rest, sleep on it, eat, whatever it needs to be, but come back to it and just talk about like, okay, we seem to keep having the same situation. Okay, Doggo added, my husband is difficult and similar to my BPD daughter. So you can set boundaries. Thank you for that additional information. Nate, yes, I'm taking clients. You can message me on TikTok and we can see if we can make that happen. So you can repair after the argument. You can set boundaries in the argument. So if you're engaging with a partner who has a lot of symptoms or characteristics of BPD, or they're fighting unfairly or whatever, you can set limits within that fight. You can walk away. You can call a moratorium. I talk with couples about throwing a code word. So you come up with a code word ahead of time that we both agree that we can use, and then you can either person can use that, and that tells you to just kind of chill and calm down. So you don't deserve to be mistreated, or abused verbally or otherwise. So you can put a boundary around that, and then repairing after, to go back to your question, that involves just a discussion rather, when people are calm and quiet and so forth. Nate, message sent. Thank you. I will take a look. Let's see. And more details on repairing and restoring trust are in my book as well. Why do therapists say we? Chloe, answering you. Why do therapists say we when she really means me? For example, how should we cope with XYZ? I don't know the circumstances. I don't know the therapist, but if we're talking about marriage, it's a team effort. If you're talking about a therapist and a patient relationship, that's a team effort too. So maybe you can say more about that, Chloe. How do we cope with XYZ? Or is the therapist saying that to you, like she's your partner in this? Or is the therapist saying it to like the couple, as you're talking about couples therapy? So how do we cope with this? In general, I think that's a softer way to say it than, how can you make changes? If it's kind of a royal we situation where they're just throwing that word in and they're just talking to you, then I can understand if that's annoying and not particularly informative. I think in a relationship and in relationship therapy, you have to be able to each take ownership for the things that you're responsible for. Marriage is a two-way street. It is not possible for any one person in the relationship to cause all the problems, even in addiction. So, right, addiction in a relationship is a primary issue. And if there's just one addict, then that person needs to get that issue resolved. But a lot of times what happens is the person who is a partner to the addict is inadvertently and sometimes knowingly enabling the behavior, whether it's getting them, Chloe, you're welcome, whether it's getting them whatever it is that they drink on a normal basis, what have you. But it's always a two-way street. So each person has to take ownership. So this is why when I do couples therapy, I have each person come in individually to discuss their history and do a thorough intake. So we're going to do, I'm going to ask a ton of questions, and we're going to do a deep dive into family of origin, because a lot of the issues that we bring to the table in relationships have to do with our relationship examples from when we were knee-high to a grasshopper. So we start learning things very early. So we want to see what patterns each person is bringing into the relationship and how that can be a problem for them. So I meet with each person for a handful of sessions to do their thorough intake. Then we start meeting as all three of us meeting together, so the couple and me, and we're talking about the different elements in marriage. I'm going to walk them through my book, which details my approach to marriage therapy. So it's really important, though, that each person takes accountability. And when the couple starts to meet together, we talk about like, okay, how is anything from your past getting in your way in this relationship? And the person knows, because we've already talked about those things. And I will always ask, does your partner, separately, does your partner know about this history? Do they know what happened to you? So forth and so on. If they don't, then of course I'm not going to bring it up, because there's a reason that you haven't told them, and I want to respect that. But making sure each person understands their role model for marriage and what they grew up with and what they see as normal, those are the things that I want to get to the bottom of. And then once you do that and you unpack it, then people are sitting there and we're talking about their history and their role models for marriage in the context of they're coming to me for marital help. And so a lot of times they make that connection themselves. And so then when the three of us are together in the conjoint sessions, it's easy to see where like, hey, I need to work on this, or hey, I need to work on this. So I think that's all of the questions. I think I answered everything. Any other questions before I head out for dinner? Thank you guys for chiming in. Thank you all for joining. We were on today talking about recurring fights and the idea that couples fight about the same stuff over and over and over again. There's an underlying issue. So we talked about money, sex, kids, trust. There are underlying issues if there are these recurring fights that you keep finding. Doggo, you're welcome. Thanks for chiming in. Thanks for asking questions. I appreciate all of you guys. Any other questions about recurring fights, marriage? We talked about don't throw around the D word, divorce. That's not fair unless one of you is going to either file for divorce or hire an attorney within the next 24 to 48 hours. Divorce is not a word that should be thrown around because it's perceived as a threat, and it's generally meant that way, let's be honest. So, not fair. All right, you guys, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I will head out. And I will see you guys for the next live. Let me figure out what I'm doing here. Oh, my partner doesn't communicate. She doesn't want to speak. Okay, so sky blue kind. That could be for any number of reasons. Obviously, I don't know the particulars and I don't know your partner, but it's what I was saying earlier is that it's very important how you approach the situation. And I'm not saying you're approaching it poorly. I honestly have no idea, right? But it's really important. Presentation is everything. So I talk about this in my book, Fair Fighting Rules, Conflict Resolution. Fix Your Freaking Marriage is the book. Thank you guys for your gifts. That's so sweet. I appreciate you, Doggo. So there are ways you can approach a situation that are good and plenty of ways that are not so good. So you want to be very, very mindful of how you approach the issues. And we talked a little bit earlier about keeping the word why out of it. So the phrase to replace why, which is a very defense-provoking word, is help me understand. So help me understand what it is about us communicating that makes you not want to do it. Right? So if you're really intense in the discussions, maybe she doesn't want to be part of it. If you're, using a lot of cuss words, if she feels attacked by your words, if she doesn't know, maybe it's not, on you so much. Maybe she just doesn't know how to handle herself. So a lot of people who grew up in angry or chaotic homes, they don't know how to fight fairly. So again, detailed in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage. But that's the question I think that is worth asking. Yes, I'm intense, but I don't curse. So that's I'm glad you keep curse words out of there. It's not productive in a fight. So if you're intense, then maybe that's making her sort of shy away or back off. Again, please pardon me. I don't know all the particulars. But sometimes it's good to have a third party kind of be a mediator. So someone who's helping you learn how to discuss things, how to approach issues. A therapist in the middle can kind of help with navigating some of that intensity, or pointing out when you're being intense, even when you don't intend to be. The other thing is when we're discussing issues in therapy, people have less of a tendency to be intense. So that just kind of, having someone present and watching just kind of levels things out in a way. One of the things I tell people is to pretend your therapist is sitting in the living room when you're going to go to your spouse with something. We went to therapy. She's one way at therapy, and at home she's different. Okay, so again, don't know the particulars, but if she's engaging at therapy, that may feel safer for her. If your intensity is, pushing her away, that may be why she's feeling safer in therapy. And so what you can do is, if you have a list of issues that you want to talk about with her, then you can kind of go in with that list. I tell people all the time, put it in your phone, bring a script, bring a note card, whatever. Let's make sure we address the issues. So you can make a list of the issues of concern, and then you can take that to therapy and say, I want some help talking to my spouse about this. Or when I try to talk to her about this, I am stonewalled. I'm met with shut down, or she doesn't want to talk about it. So then they can help you with some strategies. And again, there's chapters on fair fighting and conflict resolution in my book, Fix Your Freaking Marriage, that you can shop here. So hopefully that helps, and you guys can make even better use of the therapy. It sounds like you do accomplish some things at therapy because she's different, but certainly go in with a list of the issues that you feel like you can't talk with her about. And then I would say also, just work on your own intensity, work on your own presentation. All right, you guys, I am going to head out. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. You're welcome, Sky Blue.